Okay, good morning, good morning, good morning. Or, oh, it's not morning for most of you actually, but hi. So this session is obviously a panel of people who have lived here at different lengths, have different stories to tell. So it's to give a broader picture of ordained life. So the format is this: the first half, or the first part of the morning, Venerable has given us quite a list of questions for people to address. So we'll be working on those through the panel, and it will be all sharing from these 5 folks for the first half. Then we'll take a 20-minute break. Then when we come back, there will be it's a Q&A session with the panel. But the first part this morning is a sharing from this group who has a lot of experience and that may mirror your own and give you a sense of what to look forward to or something like that. So let's start with a short motivation, a little bit of meditation. Bring your attention to your breathing. And our Lamrim topic this morning in the online group was to reflect on what makes a meaningful life. Having, Shantideva says, by some miracle, though we know it's not, attain this precious human life, this precious opportunity with all the freedoms and fortunes to practice the Dharma. The internal conditions are present. Most of the external conditions are present. For some of us, all of them are. So reflecting then what, having recognized the treasure that we have of this life, how do we want to use it? And if we look around, of course, we see that having these conditions is so rare. So rare, looking at the way the rest of society lives, not as a judgment, but just seeing how desperately every one of us is chasing after happiness, just starving, craving, wanting to be happy and not knowing how. But through our own great fortune, we've come to the Buddhist teachings, come to have an understanding and probably deepening and more deepening conviction that the Buddha's path to happiness is actually the one that works. And that's a great fortune for us and hard enough to practice, we know. But we can't leave all those friends and family and people and frogs and chickens and everybody else on the planet behind. And when our mission becomes so much greater than our own life, then the meaning becomes all that greater too. So as we do this section, as we explore and share experiences so as to help one another, let's all hold in mind firmly that we are also, to the best of our ability, applying this to our own capacity to develop our bodhicitta, to be able to help all beings. Cultivate the wisdom that will allow us to do that in the best possible way to become Buddha. So see this as planting seeds on our path. Okay. So to start, I know that many of the people online haven't seen much of the community. So we'll have people introduce themselves one at a time. And among Venerable's questions are, please tell us why you decided to ordain and what your family and colleagues said and how did you respond? So a little bit about where you came from, who you are would be helpful. Where you came from metaphorically and maybe physically too. And what brought you to the decision to ordain. Take a little time for each person to share with that, and that'll give you a framework from where people are coming from. Shall I point, or does someone want to volunteer? Noble Jigme, very kind.
Thank you. My name is Tubden Jigme, and I ordained primarily because after meeting the Buddha's teachings in 98 with Venerable Children, it was clear pretty quickly that everything that I had done in this life was pretty much just for this life. And no matter how hard I tried, difficulties kept coming, of course. And all of the things that I was attached to did not bring the contentment that I was looking for. It felt like no matter what I did or how hard I tried or what I was involved in, there was still this hole in my heart that couldn't be filled up with anything, that I was conditioned to look for. So I thought that the way to find that peace of mind, that contentment, would be through practicing Buddhism. And so I chose to do that. And so first it was developing a daily practice. That took some time, without a doubt. Busy life, and had to work out a bit about the relationship with the teacher. Venerable can be quite direct with her teaching. And I remember early on, still in Seattle, when she had one of those teachings, and my mind was really upset and disturbed. And I just talked to myself and I said, you have to make the decision now if this is the path you want to go or not. Because if you keep coming to this space with judgment and anger about what you're hearing, you're going to, pollute it, ruin it. So make the decision. And so, either leave or stay with it and work with your mind. So I chose to work with my mind. And that was the best decision I ever made. That was kind of a pivotal turning point, I would say. I don't know what else you asked. Oh, that's enough. Okay. There you go.
My name is Tupten Damcho. I was born and raised in Singapore, and that's where I met Venerable Children. But I actually met the Dharma here in the US when I was at college. I did not grow up in a Buddhist family or with any kind of religion. So my whole life was about self-centered material pursuit and becoming an artist. That was my goal in life. So a big turning point for me was graduation from college. I came to the US to study on scholarship, and that was like the pinnacle of my parents' expectations, to get the fancy pants degree and have a job lined up. And at graduation, they were so proud. And for me, I accomplished all these things artistically that I thought I wanted to do. I won all these prizes. I was completely miserable. And that came as a huge shock. There I was with the whole family, everyone's clapping for you and you feel nothing inside. I was just drunk for about 2 weeks. And that was very disturbing. I was like, wow, okay, if it's not the thing outside that makes you happy, what is? So that's, I think, when I really started to search very seriously. And when I went back to Singapore, I connected with a Buddhist group, and then this aspiration to ordain arose. And so, oh yeah, and I went on this retreat, a novice retreat, where we got to shave our heads and wear white and, you know, take some number of precepts. And I found myself out of this world happy when I was cleaning the toilet at 5:30 in the morning. I thought, wow, that's so weird. And at the end of retreat, I cried so hard, thinking, my whole life I have been happy for 1 week. I mean, it was the first time I got in touch with a sense of inner peace, and I thought, okay, this is it. This is the path to pursue. But of course, there were distractions along the way, and I was, you know, in Singapore, you have access to a tremendous amount of Dharma from different traditions and different teachers. So it's like, you know, some search needed to figure out where the good fit is. And so I came to the Abbey. I happened to meet Venerable Chuni in Singapore. She came to teach 1 year, and she told me, come to the Abbey when nothing's happening, so you get to see what the day-to-day life is like. So I came, that was in 2011. I think I was in between job postings, and I was completely shocked by how hard everyone worked. I was expecting really meditation and study, and we were in the forest all the time. We were still building the teacher's cabin, so we were shoveling concrete. I will never forget the day where we worked for hours in the forest with Venerable Jigme and children, and we were exhausted, and then suddenly the concrete truck pulls up. Venerable Jampel has returned with rocks, and it's like, everybody go, shovel concrete. And Venerable Jigme, yes, let's do it. And we all go. And I was like, I cannot keep up with these nuns. They're like twice my age. Like, I don't know what is going on. So I left after those 2 weeks, and my mind just did a giant U-turn. I just decided, you know what, it's too hard. I'm just gonna move to Indonesia and write a book. And of course, once your mind does a U-turn, Buddha Boy appeared, and I met Buddha Boy. You know, and we were both like very active in the Buddhist circle in Singapore. You know, we were doing all these good Buddhist things on the weekend, and that's really where I thought my life was going to go. Until Venerable Chuni, again, good Dharma friend intervening, says, "Hey, Venerable Children is teaching in Indonesia. Do you want to help her out as an assistant?" And I'm like, "Oh, sure, I love Indonesia. Let's do it." That I proceed to go on this trip. I go visit my good friend there, go with the boyfriend, go surfing, and then like, bye boyfriend, and then go and serve the teacher, right? Like, there's no sense in my mind that these are contrary or different. It's like, you know, it's just stuff that I think is cool. Let's do it. But that retreat really changed my mind. I think just watching what Venerable is like day to day, how she lives her life, how she's constantly trying to benefit people. And there were a lot of monastics gathered too. There was a big group of bhikkhunis and bhikshunis from different traditions gathered at Borobudur, and she was teaching them. So just to be part of that, and we did a lot of purification, and I really asked myself, what am I doing with my life? You know, and Venerable was very kind. She asked me things like, you know, what is your mind like in a relationship now? Yeah, just check up. She never said, bad, you know, you changed your mind. She said, just look, just watch. How is it going for you? And I decided, you know, from comparing my experience being very dedicated to practice and then being in a relationship, I thought, no, this is not, I don't think it's beneficial for me or the other person or my life, future lives, and so forth. So that's when I decided to really cut that off and come to the Abbey and follow the training procedure everyone here has. You know, you come for 3 months, you spend some time away, and then I came back to train and I stayed.
Do I need this or this?
Oh yeah.
Let's see, to create some context, I was introduced to Buddhism in high school. Oh, my name is Tenzin Seppel. And I was first introduced to meditation, I should say, not Buddhism, but meditation in high school. This was back in the 70s, and the Beatles were meditating, and it was the cool thing to do. And so I learned how to do some basic breathing meditation, and I was hooked. The Christian brother at the high school where I was attending, he was watching us play tennis one day, and he said, "I'll help you with your tennis game. I'll teach you how to meditate." And so he had this little machine that you strap something around your head and you watch your breath, and this little machine registers, what waves you're producing, alpha, beta, theta, that sort of thing. And so right there, I had direct proof that I could do something with my mind and it made a difference. So I kept meditating. My mom would come into my room and she'd say, "Stop that, you're going to go crazy." So I probably dropped it pretty soon, but then I picked it back up when I was out of college and never looked back. And so I was involved with Vipassana for 10 years. And at one point I was doing some Goenka retreats, and for various reasons, I had to stop doing Goenka retreats. I was practicing Reiki, and they don't like you to mix their meditation technique with anything else. And so at that time, I was pretty bummed out that I wouldn't be able to continue with the retreats, but a friend introduced me to Venerable Children, took me to one of her talks, and I thank her to this day. So here's a stellar role model of monastic life. How could a person be more fortunate? So for a few years, I studied with her, did retreats, and then we used to do a New Year's Vajrasattva retreat every New Year's, and I love that retreat. Maybe it's the ex-Catholic coming out, the purification. But one year we asked her if we could do it longer, instead of just a weekend or a long weekend, but could we do it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks? And she said, well, typically it's done as a 3-month retreat. And that was all it took. And so several of us organized our lives so that we could go and do a 3-month Vajrasattva retreat. That was in 1998. And when you sit and look at your mind for 3 months, you recognize there's a lot to do, a lot to clean up. And I've never been someone who's done things in half measures in my life. If I'm going to do it, I jump in and do it 100%. And so shortly after that retreat, the thought just started arising in my mind, I have to ordain. It was news to me. It was a surprise. I didn't think it would happen. But yeah, this thought kept reappearing in my mind. I must ordain. And so I remember a very important talk that I had with Venerable Children walking through Discovery Park. And we hatched a plan that I would go to India, live for a period of time, and see if I could separate from my family and friends and explore what ordained life was like, at least in India. And that was a good opportunity. So I had a very unconventional Anagarika period. I lived in India and had a lot of freedom, actually, more freedom than I needed. But I did meet a lot of wonderful people, and I talked to a lot of monastics and asked them about their life. And I had a chance to, finally see who I was, separate from my environment. So I'm very grateful that I had such a stellar Western role model as a monastic that I relied on. And so then I ordained with His Holiness. I received novice ordination with His Holiness. And I got sidetracked. Venerable hadn't started the Abbey yet. And so in India, I met some people that were going to Chenrezig Institute. And I asked her if I could go along. I thought I would just go and see what this study program was like. And I ended up staying there a lot longer than I thought I would. So I've just joined the Abbey in 2016, and I'm so glad to be here.
My name is Tipton Sumpton, and I'm trying to figure out what part's the story to tell, because there's so many strands here. So maybe I'll start with, and you heard some of this in the BBC the other day. In 1996, I happened to be in this area doing a workshop, and I had previously met Venerable Chuni, who was coming up to Edmonton to do some healing work. Hope you don't mind me saying that, Reiki. And I'd met her through that avenue. And so since I was around here that summer, I thought, well, I'll just drive over and see her. And I'd never been to Seattle. And, the goal of that drive was to hook up, to meet with her and then go out for a really nice dinner in Seattle. And that was my goal. So instead, after about 6 hours in a very hot car that didn't have air conditioning, I get to her door and she said, guess what? You're just in time. We're going to go to a Dharma talk. And I thought, great. And I think you shoved some, strawberries in my hand. I was sweaty and stinky, and off we went. And I had known about Venerable Chuni's growing interest in Buddhism, but there wasn't a lot of hard sell about it. I would ask questions and she would, explain things. There was no build up about Venerable Tipton Children at all. So I had no idea what we were actually going to do once we were sitting in this room. There was a chair in the front. And so I just thought, okay, here we are. I'll just try not to think about the nice meal we're going to have the whole time. And I can tell this part of the story now because Venerable Children's not in the room. I would never tell this if she was. So there's a chair in the front, and all of a sudden I see this woman with a shaved head and maroon robes just walk to the chair and sit down. And a bomb went off in my mind because I was a former Catholic. But what I translated that movement of a body sitting down in a chair, she hadn't said anything yet. I thought, I'm looking at a saint. That's the only thing that I could figure out that I was seeing. No buildup, trust me. And then she started to unpack the kindness of others teaching. Every religion has that topic. I'd never heard of it framed in that way. And then she led a meditation on the kindness of others. And it was very, I was astounded at the impact it had. But, you know, it was 96. I went back to my life in Canada. I had a very nice, talented boyfriend. We'd bought a house. I had a job as a teacher. Technically, I had everything, an extended family that I got together with often. You know, everything was going in the worldly way pretty well, except I was pretty unhappy. So every time that Venerable Trini would come to Edmonton, we'd go out for dinner. Finally, you know, that dinner. And I'd spend a large part of the dinner complaining about my life. So every visit, she'd hear about this. And finally, one time, you know, I think her compassion waned, but maybe it was compassion. She reached in her bag and she said, look, you're so miserable. Why don't you come to this 10-day retreat? And I looked at the flyer. I had been trying a lot of things at this point to see, you know, what is the source of this misery and how can I get over it? But I looked at the flyer and I thought, why not? I mean, what have I got to lose? So it was the time where Venerable Children was giving 10-day retreats at Cloud Mountain. I went. It was on green Tara. Why does she have to be green? And I was totally lost for much of the time, except, you know, after about 3 days, and this is heavy duty Lam Rim teachings as well as the green Tara, I noticed something I did not expect. I felt happier. And that was a total surprise. I wasn't going for anything. I just thought I'd have this experience with green Tara, you know, maybe take her image back home and put it on my wall and tell my friends what I did for 10 days. But this was really something. So that, you know, I kept showing up when I could to go to these Cloud Mountain retreats. A few years later, I took a year off from my teaching career and I went to study Buddhism in India and Nepal for a year. And that was very important because I met with some of Venerable Children's teachers, but I also saw what the effect was of doing something like Dharma full time, instead of at the end of my teaching day when I was totally exhausted and then too tired, of course, to do it in the morning. At least that's what I told myself. I thought, this is really interesting. But then life goes on, you know. And then I decided to come here in 2007 and help out for a month. And it was really, really hot, not quite as hot as it's been here. We were working on the little log cabin. Venerable was actually away for most of the time that I was here. And we were just, there were so many knapweed weeds to pull. And we were working in the heat, really hard physical work. There weren't that many people here. And by the end of that month, I was pretty tired, but my mind was really different. And I thought, wow, again, when you do something full time, you can really stay focused as much as I could at that time, you know. But that was very important. And then the other key that I alluded to the other day in the talk was that my cousin died at the age of 43. And the one part I didn't get to in that BBC talk was, you know, the part of the death meditation where family and friends can't help you at the time of death. And so seeing my cousin head towards death, feeling so helpless. And, you know, I went to her home in Calgary. I was traveling to Calgary from Edmonton as much as I could to give her Reiki, to just be with her. We did the Medicine Buddha retreat. She was totally open to that. And to see that nothing that we could do, Venerable's prayers didn't help. The Buddha's prayers didn't help. The Buddhas couldn't help. I was petitioning them every day. And she still died. So I haven't cried about this in a long time. But that was the key. And I thought, well, you know what? With an ordinary mind, I can't do anything. And in the time I've got left in this life, I better get on it. Because the time of death is really, who knows? And whatever I can do to be less of a jerk in this life, I better do that too and see how, practice will help my mind. It's good now.
Hello, I'm Tubten Losong. I was raised with Christianity, and I kind of rejected that religion after a while. But I was very interested in Buddhism in my early 20s and 30s. But I was living out in the woods in Montana, very far away from any centers and kind of reclusive. So I didn't really pursue it much. I read some books, but I really didn't have any guidance. And in 2006, I started reading some books by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. I was going through one particular book. I think it's called An Open Heart, The Art of Compassion. And there's some reflections and meditations in there. And I would come up to one and do the meditation. And sometimes I would stall out in the book because I really wanted to spend some time in the meditations. And I get distracted on something. Actually, at that time, I didn't know a whole lot about the Buddhist worldview. And I was living in a community environmental campaign, but I had my own cabin, and I had recently quit drinking and thought I'm gonna live celibately and sober and try to do meditations every evening and just work with the books I had. And that went all right for a little while, and then I ended up getting into a relationship for 5 years and totally distracted from it. Yeah. And so even though I still had an interest in Buddhism, it was definitely, I couldn't find time to meditate or to really spend any time on this, And then in 2013, my partner went to Mexico for a month. And I thought, well, this is a good time for me to spend getting back into meditating and such. And so I started doing meditations and spending more time reading, started over with His Holiness's book, which I had read halfway through about 3 times. Started over with it. And when I got a ways through it, I started to understand more of it. And the term Sangha was coming up, and I wanted to know about be around other practitioners. So I got online and looked for a Buddhist center in Spokane because that's really the easiest town to get to. And what I found was a link where some of the nuns had been going to the UU and teaching in Spokane. So there was a link to the Abbey's website. And I said, oh, Newport, that's even closer, because I was only 95 miles from here. And they were getting ready to have their Sharing the Dharma Day, the first one of the year. And so I decided I was going to go to that. And also then my girlfriend called up from Mexico and said, I'm not coming back. And so, and I'm like, I'm totally gonna just go into what I was doing before this. I got sidetracked on this. I was very distraught, to tell you the truth. And I came over for Sharing the Dharma Day, the first one of the year. And I think in 2013, I came here every month until the winter retreat. Not always on the Sharing the Dharma Day, because I couldn't always make it then. But I was very impressed by the monastics here. And then when I started coming over a couple times when it wasn't the Sharing the Dharma Day, I was even more impressed, because I was like, I've been seeing them on their most frazzled, excited day of the month, and they come over here when they're not all. I was even, when there wasn't a lot of commotion going on, I was even more impressed. And impressed with the Lam Rim, because I didn't have a concise outline of the Buddhist worldview. And I was very impressed with the Lam Rim. And so I really liked that. I kept coming over for teachings. And I remember in the fall, I was leaving after being here for the last time in the fall before winter retreat. And I drove Venerable Semke to town to pick up a car on my way out. I remember telling her that I was really getting it about the precious human life. And then the next year, I ended up coming over 10 days a month to work in the forest. And I hadn't told anybody this, but I was really considering ordination. And then I came over one time and they were getting ready to do EML. And actually I had a contract with the Abbey to do some work in the forest through a forest co-op I worked with. And I said to Venerable Semke, I know I'm here to do this work, but I wanted to do EML. And she said, I'll talk to Venerable Chodron. And then Venerable Chodron had told her, Dharma is priority. But I don't think anybody here was surprised either. And so really, what it boiled down to for me is my practice was becoming a real practice. And I felt like if I don't take this on seriously, I'll just let it become sidetracked again, like it was when it was a scattered nothing. And so, and I also felt like this is kind of what I've been looking for. I've been drawn to this. That's why I think I was interested in Buddhism for a couple decades without really finding out what it was about. But the more I found out about it, the more it resounded with me. And so I moved over here in 2014, right around Christmas, took Anagarika precepts in January of 2015. And by August, I was going over to Seattle to get ordination at a Chinese temple over there during EML. So I came back and it was EML here. And it was the whole crew that I had left and they were all very excited. And so was I. But I was very happy to be able to be spending my life trying to develop virtuous qualities and be around other people who are doing that. And I try to remember that whenever I'm flustered and not doing so well, or when someone around me is flustered and not doing so well. We're all dedicating our lives to trying to progress on the path. And sometimes I wish I had found this path much, much earlier, but I guess I probably wasn't ready for it yet.
I'm going to start with some of these questions and just see who feels like it would be useful. I know this came up in the discussion, but one of the questions is, how did your family and colleagues react when you told them, and how did you respond? How did you work through that? So I don't think we need 5 answers to that, but a couple of people, if anybody feels particularly moved to want to share, what the response was or what you had to do to make it happen. Sure. Thanks for listening.
Well, I know a lot of different people, so I got a lot of different reactions, but I'll talk about my mother's reaction. She is a fundamentalist Christian, and she pretty much believes that religions besides Christianity are a trick of the devil. And so I didn't talk to her much about it, but in 2016, when she was dying of cancer, I went over to visit her in September before she got where she was bedridden and such. I wanted to see her while she was still fairly healthy. And a lot of my siblings were over there. We have a very big family. And we were sitting around in her front room. And she asked me, I think she asked me if I knew anybody who really had achieved anything with the Buddhist path or anything. And I said, I think the Dalai Lama is, very, I don't know exactly what I said, maybe a realized being or something, I don't know. But she started to say something about, oh, I've heard things about him. And my little sister, Amy, who's also got Buddhist tendencies, started to blow up at my mother. And I just held my mother's hand and I said, we don't agree on this. Let's talk about something else. And the whole room was quiet watching us. And then my brother started a conversation with my nephew across the room, like from here to Nicole, I think purposely to lead the conversation onward. And that was it. And when she was actively dying at her bedside, I came again to visit. And I wore my robes, but I wore a pullover, red pullover over it. And I knelt by her bed. And all she could really see is the red shirt. I didn't want to remind her I was in the robes. And when she was sick, I read the Bible to her like she asked. And so just tried to be calm about it.
Sure.
So I have a very tight-knit, sticky family. So the first time when I started going to the temple for quite a while, one day my mom sits me down and says, "Are you thinking about becoming a nun?" I said, "Yeah." And then she broke down and cried and was like, "What have I done wrong?" And I'm like, "Oh my God." And I was really badly affected by that at the time. I was still working out this 6-year contract, right? So eventually I said, okay, if you really want me to get married, I will try and find someone for your sake, something like that. And my friends were all like, stop emotionally blackmailing your mother. So I'm like, but that's what she wants me to do. And then eventually when I dated Buddha boy, the family was like, make sure you're doing this for yourself, okay? But it was a source of tension. My sister is also evangelical Christian. My folks are not religious. So when she heard about this too, I think she just cried she cries a lot anyway, so she just cried. And then, but it was very kind. She borrowed a book about Buddhism and tried to talk to me about it. So yeah, there were a lot of obstacles along the way. What helped me a lot was when I was here for the 3 months exploring, we sat a 1-week Chenrezig retreat, and I really sat with the notion like, this is the best way to repay my parents' kindness. I thought so much about the kindness I've received from them, and to get very clear in myself that, cooking noodles or having a child is not the best way to repay that kindness from multiple lifetimes. But I had to be very convinced of that in myself. So that inner work had to be done first. And then eventually when I decided to leave, Venerable gave me very good advice. She said, as low key as possible, do not make this a big deal. Like every obstacle will arise. So, I went back, I just tied up my stuff in about a month and said bye to whoever I could, but I only told my parents, I'm just coming to train, that's all. It's still a training period, we'll think about it. Eventually when I told them online, I think they cried every time I met them online for about a year. Venerable at some point told me, I think you should stop meeting them on Skype because you get to watch them cry, just call them on the phone because it's just not good for your mind. Yes, it was very difficult, very painful, but I had to be very clear in myself that I was not harming them. I'm very clear what my motivation is, and I kept coming back to that. I kept trying to express that as best as I could. I know they don't understand it, that's fine. So it was just this long process. So I ordained, they didn't come because my dad said he would just cry through it. I'm like, okay, sure. When I went back to Singapore the first time, it was very hard. We arrived, I think they keep bringing extended family to the airport. So Venerable jokes about that. But at the airport, there will be my aunts and my grandparents. They're like, yeah. I'm like, oh no. Venerable said to me, kind sentient beings. I'm like, okay. But through that, they get to connect with Venerable. It was quite marvelous. And I saw that, you help to connect your family with the Dharma and to keep that very clear. She did not leave me unsupervised for many years. I never met my family alone for more than an hour. Just her helping me to set those boundaries that I could not myself, I think. The first time I went back, I met my sister at the airport. This was the hardest one. She just cried for 20 minutes. I went in the family car. She went in another car. In the whole car ride, my sister just cried and cried and cried. And finally I said, I didn't die, you know. And she's like, I'm still here. Yeah, so just being very clear myself, I am doing something I think is beneficial, even if you don't believe it. And working with my own attachment to reputation and all of that. Yeah. When my folks came, every time I've met them, every bomb, you know, every hook they could throw has come out. And I'm glad I could watch my mind and be like, you know, everything from we will sponsor your graduate degree to what am I going to tell my friends? Do you know how hard it's been? Thank you. So yeah, that's been a big practice.
Let's go to the next question. Thank you. No, that's good. Those are good. They're both beautiful stories. But what did you have to adjust to after ordaining? What did you have to adjust to and how did you do that?
How many hours do we have?
I'll call you if it gets too long.
Okay, good. Oh, my heavens. Well, you know, I ordained, I think I was late 40s. So I had lived a long, you know, a life and I was, you know, accomplished and blah, blah, and, you know, successful out there. So I came here and I remember the first months, I kept saying things and nobody paid attention to me. It was like, you know, in my world out there, people listened to me. And so it was so interesting. And so really, I had this mantra in my mind, there are no enemies here. That's what I kept saying to myself. There are no enemies here because it felt like I was so invisible. But, you know, that's part of the training to let go of what I know out there because it doesn't really help here so much, you know? And so it's really a process of letting go and starting fresh. And, you know, being transparent and acknowledging, you know, one's faults and one's afflictions as they come up, and then try to work with them. You know, so that really was the first hurdle, was to, it reminds me of kind of like shedding skin, you know, that you come with something and then it doesn't serve you at all. So you start shedding that. And then that's scary because you don't know what's underneath it. You know, it's like, okay, that's my security. If I don't have that, where's the ground? What do I step on next? You know? And so the brilliance of the Buddha's idea about community is so helpful because no matter how I acted, no matter how I still act, there is kindness around me. And so that gives me the strength to walk through my mess because there's kindness around me. And that's the most important thing. Gosh, yeah.
I think everyone has some good stories on this topic, so I'll just pick one topic. So prior to coming here, I was a school teacher, an elementary school teacher, and you do the job mostly alone. In fact, you do everything alone, right? You're in charge alone. So you boss people around. And then you get here and you have all of these other bosses. So with great respect towards Venerable Semke, she is able to work in the forest, I think 24 hours without even taking a breath. And I was in pretty good shape when I came here, but trying to keep up with her in the forest, it was like a bleep, bleep marathon. And it was just incredible. And we would have very short breaks. Like we'd have about 3 minutes to get some water and shove some nuts down your mouth. And then you keep going again. And I found that a bit challenging.
She never peed.
I don't know. Yeah. So Venerable Jigme just said she never needed to go to the bathroom. Yeah, you sweat it off. There's no chance of going to the bathroom. You sweat it. The other thing that drove me absolutely crazy for the first few years is something we call a swarm. Now, a swarm is where everyone has to gather at an unannounced time. You don't know it's happening. You don't know it's going to happen until it happens. And there are very few of us here in the beginning years. It would typically happen when Venerable has just returned for a long trip. So in my mind, I would think, oh, good, we've got another couple of days because she'll be resting with jet lag and all of that. Oh my God. She'd be here maybe an hour, and then we'd all be moving furniture from one building to the next, and we'd be changing what's hanging on the walls. And I'd be thinking, aren't you tired? In fact, one time I did ask her, don't you need a rest, Venerable children? And she'd say, I was resting on the plane. What's wrong with you? Well, there's a lot wrong with me, obviously. Anyway, in time, I've sort of gotten over the swarm. Oh, and then another time, it just drove me crazy. So people are very kind and generous. A very kind person shipped a lot of furniture over here in a U-Haul thing. And the U-Haul arrived at about, I don't know, 8:30 at night, or maybe it arrived at medicine meal time around 6. But of course, we had practice. And it was at the time where at the end of practice, it was pitch dark. And I thought to myself, there's no way we're unloading this thing tonight. Guess what? We're all unloading the furniture in the pitch dark. And I'm just in my mind screaming. And it was just so painful. So eventually I had to get over this. And, I just saw we've had some swarms in the forest. And I just see that, it's actually a pretty cool thing. Everyone comes together. A lot gets done in a short time. Just seeing Venerable so happy, it is rather contagious. And so I think I'm slowly being healed from my swarm aversion. May you have the same experience.
Am I wrong in the fact that you called a swarm this year? Yeah. I believe you did. That's healing. That's healing. Okay.
I think no matter what community you live in as a monastic, you will be living with people you wouldn't normally choose to live with. And so that's one of the big adjustments of learning how to reel in some of your rules of the universe and understand that there are many ways to do things. I really appreciate the offering service prayer that we do every morning. It reminds us there are many ways to do many things. So that's one big adjustment. And it's a very rich opportunity as well as sometimes quite irritating. But and then the other thing is the constant change. And of course, everything is constantly changing, but we're pretty good at denying that. But especially in monastic life, it's obvious how much change there is, whether it's a schedule or it's expectations or even your expectations about yourself, where you think you are in your practice, and all of a sudden the rug gets pulled out from underneath you. So that's, I think, a big adjustment too. Still working on it. Well, mind training, I mean, we've got Venerable Children. She's teaching us about mind training every moment of the day that she's opening her mouth. That's so helpful to bring it back to one's own mind and to begin asking questions like, what button is this pushing in me? Why is this difficult? How can I work with this? What Dharma tools do I have that I can apply in this situation? Maybe I just need a timeout. Yeah, many ways to work with it like that. And also starting to appreciate the richness there is in living with different people. Like when you live with a Canadian, you get to learn to be much more conscientious about being kind and gentle with people. I didn't grow up that way. I appreciate that about you. Yeah, it's a great benefit. Or, that's sincere. Yeah, everyone, there's something to learn about, especially people from different cultures, but also just different backgrounds. We all have such different family conditions and lifestyles and experiences.
Anything else on that one? All right, then the next, leading on from there, is how has your practice grown or changed since, as a result of being ordained, do you think?
Again, how many hours do we have? Gosh. I think what first really got my attention in terms of change, this path is really slow, and so doing 3-month retreats here in the winter, after coming out and then starting to reflect on kind of the year, I started seeing change. And when I lived in the world, I worked to help people who wanted to change. So that's a snail pace. How we change here is like a bullet train. It's very quick in the grand scheme of things, even though it's slow. It's not the kind of process where, you read something, digest it, learn it, and take the test and then go to the next thing. Of course, it's not like that at all. But once you get the Buddhist worldview down, you get a stable practice. And if you can learn how to get out of your own way, then things change quite quickly in this context. And so I guess that's the first thing that I was able to see. So I measure my growth or change yearly. I do it once a year after retreat. And, when I first came here, it was like, okay, tick-tock, let's get to it. I should be at such and such. And that's the obstacle. You need to get yourself out of the way of that one. And the other piece that somebody else already said, you're going along and you think everything's good, and then kaboom, karma ripens and, you're in a mess again. And so to be accepting of that, is another way to get yourself out of your own way. I don't have control over anything, nothing. And when I can keep that in my mind's pretty good. The moment I start holding on to stuff, not so good. Yeah.
I think what brought me to ordination at the first EML that I attended was that EML, we talked a lot about our afflictions. I felt like every discussion group was about a different affliction, and we talked about how it worked in our lives. And that was just absolutely sobering and terrifying. I just felt like, wow, if I continue like this, I'm creating the causes for a negative rebirth. I need to get out of this. That was a big propelling factor for why I came back to train. And I think this whole time is just about working with the afflictions. And when I was out in the lay world, I could distract myself, ignore, or the afflictions are nourished and encouraged. I think the first 2 years of monastic life are I don't know, about 2 years is really challenging because you're coming face to face with these afflictions, like without the object around. You are seeing your own mind for the first time. And I identify so strongly with my mind and my thoughts. I was like, I am such a bad person. I couldn't get any space there, So the first 2 years was just, it felt like, you're trying to get used to a new identity, kind of, right? Your practice is like on steroids because the afflictions are coming up and you don't have anywhere to run. And the number of tools you have are like, I really felt like I had a fork with a giant monster. It's like, okay, what do you do now? Like, you've heard the teachings and here it is, big time. And there's so many triggers, right? The family calling you crying, these people you don't like that you live with, and oh my God, there's a schedule, and so it's normal, okay? I feel like everyone goes through it in the first few years, and then you're like, I'm crazy and I'm so bad and everybody looks so calm. It's not true. We've all been there. It's just the process of going from what you were familiar with to a whole new way of thinking and a new way of life. And it's hard. So be patient with yourself. And so it helped a lot to have people who've done the same, and you talk to them, they're like, oh, it's normal. Like, oh, you got angry with everyone in the community? Yeah, it's normal. That's the nature of anger. It just changes its object. You're like, oh, okay. So learning to actually apply the teachings that way was so helpful. So yeah, it's not much has changed in that regard, but I think just getting familiar with the structure, the form, where I can turn to for help. You do grow in your skill with the antidotes. I think a lot about, there was a monastic, two monastics actually told me, it takes about 10 years to figure out what monastic life is about. And as a layperson, I was like, what? That's so long. I'm kind of on year 9. It's like, it's true. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm starting to kind of maybe get it. Like, this is what it's about. Because you just keep getting distracted by the appearance of this life that's outside of you. You keep setting stupid goals. Like, when I do X, it's like, it's really not about that. It's about this. And only you can measure that. Yeah.
I think I'd like to mention this because it's something that can happen to people, maybe not so much at the Abbey, but in the first years of my ordination, I was living in an environment where there was a lot of study going on. And it's very exciting. I find it very exciting to do study. I really enjoyed it. And one can build up a strong identity about being a student or being a scholar or being someone who knows. And that can be a real impediment. So it's an easy trap for people to fall into. And so I found myself in that situation after 14 years of study. And that's when I decided I wanted to come to the Abbey. And so what I find here at the Abbey and how my practice has changed being here is that, again, the container is more intentional here at the Abbey. There are fewer places. There's no place to hide, actually. Anybody found one? There's no place to hide, and you found one. Your hammock.
We know where that hammock is. Venerable Becky.
And it may take a while to appreciate this, that there's no place to hide, because you do feel like you're being skinned alive at first. I did anyway. But what we're being skinned of are things that really slow us down from what we want to accomplish. And so I have a lot of appreciation for the way monastic life is practiced and the training that happens here at the Abbey. One thing that has surprised me is that I would say that a lot of the teachings here are about the afflictions and how to work with the afflictions, how to work with anxiety, how to work with our crazy mind, just identifying all that goes on in our mind. But I think in a subtle way, what's happening is that we are undermining the self. It's not like we're going head. There are teachings on emptiness here for sure, but these subtle underminings of self-centeredness, self-grasping really add up over time, so that I think that everyone here has, over time develops that chipping away. It's like we're learning who we aren't every day of the year. And that's such a benefit.
How do you handle conflicts?
There's no conflicts here. Don't hit me. So when I first came here, I dealt with conflicts like my family did, and oh my gosh, that was not a skillful thing. So we have instituted a lot of different methods to help us with our affliction of anger and all the afflictions. But so we've adopted nonviolent communication as kind of the template, the model that we use to communicate. And we've had some retreats on it. We have classes on it. We're starting up the classes again and doing it again. So it's this ongoing process. And of course, it's hard to change the way that we communicate when we're angry. That's not an easy thing because reptile brain is driving the wagon, So, but I think just having this ideal of using this method and even having a little bit of information about it, it sets the standard differently. And so that helps to put the brakes on when afflictions arise. So I do a lot of keeping my mouth shut, frankly. I try not to talk when my mind is disturbed. So that's really the first one. And then finding some ways to communicate that. We do a lot of drive-bys here. So, somebody drives by quick and they have this thing going and they're, and, I'm not resourced enough to even hear it, much less do anything what they're asking me. So to find ways to say, this isn't the time to talk about this right now. I can't, but I'll be happy to, after, I get resourced a bit, or, when I finish this particular thing, or so it's about slowing down. It's about acceptance. So the external is the slowing down. The internal is the acceptance. When I am pissed off, if I accept that, then I can work with it. If I stuff it down and I don't have any anger, I'm fine, then boy, does that pop out all different kinds of ways and really, not helpful. And, we all know, I don't have to say a thing. People know when I'm angry. They know. And I know when everybody else in the community is angry. So we're close enough that, you don't hide anything. And so it's that process of accepting it and not beating yourself up about it, and then applying the different antidotes so that you can mitigate it, get a hold of it, do something different, react in a different way. And there's a lot of buy-in for that we allow ourselves to take the time to work with these things, that is important. So that's a shared value that we have, I think.
What Venerable Jigme was sharing reminded me, I think, first of all, we'll turn to all the strategies we know and are familiar with, right? And so just even noticing them is the first step, right? Because they don't work in a monastery. So whether it's suppression or avoidance, right? Everybody knows you're angry. Or what I used to, tell the teacher, there's a problem. Try that one. I've tried. No, she's not gonna bite the hook. Or it just becomes, oh, sounds like you're angry. Want to work with it? Like, no. Or I've also tried being a people pleaser, right? So you carry messages between people. Venerable at some point told me, who do you think you are, Henry Kissinger? So then you realize that all your strategies are affliction driven. Then it's like, what's left? Oh, the Dharma. Maybe we should try that, right? So that was a big process, just even recognizing, seeing, wow, that's actually affliction driven, it's not effective or caring or kind. And then what's the alternative? It helps a lot to have a community that will just reflect back your affliction. No one's blaming you. Just having people not bite the hook. You're like, oh, wait, that's all for me. Okay, go clean it up. Nonviolent communication, I feel, is very helpful too. I used it a lot in my own mind first, yeah. And then just learning my own conditioning. Like I used to get very disturbed when I saw conflicts arise in front of me, but that's just a matter of family conditioning. Me thinking, that's bad, it's not supposed to happen. It's like, everyone expresses themselves differently. No one's getting harmed. And then noticing when I'm triggered and how to de-escalate. I mean, in a community, honestly, it's like, is someone breaking a root precept? No. Okay. Then what is this really about? Oh, I don't like how it's being done. Do we need to be so upset and anxious about it? What's going on for the other person? Yeah. And then there are lots of people I can talk to get a reality check on what's happening. Yeah. So those are things I found helpful.
So I'm about 5'2" on a good day and about 105 pounds. So I just beat people up. Actually, that doesn't happen here. So, can you see this on screen? Could you hold up?
Oh, the camera's right there.
Right here?
No, in front of you.
Working with anger. I got this book years ago before I lived at the Abbey. It sat in my bookshelf. And I had many people that I would give the book to, but I never read it. Because why would I? And then you come to the Abbey and there's all these angry people around you. And for heaven's sake, they should read it, wouldn't you think? So there's people have heard me talk about this many, many times. In this little slender book, please get it. It's about 164 pages. There's 64 different antidotes for anger. 64. Can you imagine if all of us had maybe 15 of them ready, ever ready, right? That would be so cool. So there's a very big one here about knowing what your buttons are. So again, you come to the Abbey thinking you have no buttons, not a single one. We do. And early on when I came to the Abbey, I asked Venerable Children, what should I do when I'm feeling angry? She said, don't say anything. That was very, very good advice. And then we get to all reboot. We have a 3-month winter retreat where technically we're keeping silence for about 3 months. And in that period of keeping silence, you can see your mind just sort of get inflamed with the topic. Why are you doing like that? And just, this inner conversation is going on. Unfortunately, mostly it's not being expressed. And then you get a little bit more information, then maybe 5 hours go by and maybe 24 or 38 hours go by. And then you look at that little flame thing and you think, what was that about? It was just such a waste of time. And so, Venerable teaches all the time about the disadvantages of self-centered thought. She's teaching this in many different ways all the time. She models, how to practice in every moment. And so there's a lot of clues here, and you've heard some of them about how we can work with these afflicted mental states. And, we all have the best idea here. Let's face it. My idea is the best one. And if you don't agree with me, well, let's work it out. So there's all kinds of situations to work with this situation, which is just normal. It's a human situation that arises, and there's many, many tools to deal with it. And the longer you spend learning the Dharma, the more tools you have, and the happier you'll be. You don't have to beat people up.
I suspect we have different ways of dealing with conflict with each person, because each person will remind us of some way we've worked with conflict in the past. What's really beautiful is that over time, there are certain people who, it's kind of like the cats. Sometimes they'll come together and go, "Meow," and then they just go off and do their own thing. And sometimes it can be that simple with another person, like each person just owns, oh, I just escalated there. I didn't need to. And then work with your mind. It's really a lovely thing to experience.
And then how do you work with self-doubt? Can't do it, not good enough. It's over my head. Everybody can but me. Never will.
When I moved to the Abbey, I made a very strong decision that this is what I was going to do. And I wasn't going to second guess it. And that held for a pretty long time, actually. So not letting it, take hold is helpful. Over the years, it did start seeping in different places. But by that time, I had enough different tools in my medicine chest that I could apply those and, work with them. So that's what worked for me.
So I think that it's just something that happens as we practice the Dharma, that doubts will come up, and they'll come sometimes out of left field. You think you've got that one area sort of figured out, and then something happens and it's like kabamo. It's like, wow, I'm really doubting myself. I'm doubting my capacity. I doubt that, we can doubt everything. And it comes. It's really quite surprising. And then one of the things that I do when this comes up is I just say, okay, well, have you always felt this way about this particular doubt? Is it true that you're truly hopeless in all dimensions of your life? That everything is hopeless? And then maybe on that particular day, I'll have the wherewithal to think that, well, I actually can go and wash the dishes quite well. I really enjoy vacuuming. I can clean the floor. I can keep my mouth shut. And this topic right now that we're studying in the Dharma is really hard for me. But, if I just keep at it, maybe it won't be so hard in 5 years, And if I just have the mind and I have the mind that wants to give up. I sure do. And that is a misery-making mind where you just think, this is just too hard. Maybe I'm not really suited to this. Maybe I should go and just make room for someone else here. And then if it gets really bad, then I just have to, Venerable recommends having these talks with ourselves. And I haven't gone to talk to her yet about doubt. But I think, the next time it comes up, because the last time was pretty intense. I think, here I am, I'm living with a spiritual teacher. Why am I doubting that she wouldn't have the time to help me? Or why am I doubting that she's not interested to help me? That's what she's here for. So I'm talking to myself, right? This ignorant mind that says, don't want to bother her. She's too busy. This is just low level, nam talk. And meantime, I'm getting myself really worked up into a state, So be prepared for it. Doubt will come. And it will come when we're least expecting it. And to just have some things prepared about how we will talk to ourselves or talk to, a person in the community. And if that doesn't feel like that's safe, the person to talk to is, if you're here, Venerable Dupton children or wherever you are with a spiritual teacher.
I think I've had doubt come up in my ordained life twice in a very big way. Yeah. And when I look at those episodes, I think it has to do with there's an identity that I'm holding on to or I've become very settled in, and it's getting challenged big time. And that whole rocking of the boat is what throws, it's like, wait a second, what do I hang on to here? There feels like there's no center. But actually, it's a time of a lot of growth because that false or not helpful identity is being shredded. And it's very painful. So that happened early in my monastic life for sure. I had a very peaceful, blissful anagarika period. Then I ordained and I go back and the family freaks out. And, suddenly it was like, am I in the right place? What have I done? I thought I had already dealt with this, but it really came up big time in retreat. And I was shocked. Venerable Tarpa was so kind. She was the one who reached out to me one day and said, I think you're working with doubt. I'm like, I am? She's like, here is a whole folder of things I've saved on this topic. I've gone through it. You can read it. I'm like, oh, that was so kind and helpful. And so I read that folder and I was like, oh, it's doubt. And the antidote is to study. Oh, okay, I could do that. Like study what actually nourishes and helps your mind to deal with this state of thinking it's like eating up itself. It's a carnivorous demon. It really is. So that last year I felt I had a lot of doubt come up too, which Venerable Jingmei very kindly sat through. She was the kind senior. I was like, bah. She's like, But a lot of it had to do with, I was settled in my kind of identity as a junior monastic. And then you just grow in ordination and you get bumped into other roles. And I'm like, what? I will forever be a junior. I don't want to take more responsibilities. Go away. And who are these new people? Like suddenly I'm not the junior anymore. Yeah. So I had a huge thing come up. I didn't even know, right? You're like, oh, this is what happens. Yeah, at some point I went and complained to Venerable, who mocked my afflictions for 15 minutes. So beware. And then at some point said, oh, you're just going through a monastic adolescence. It's all right. Like, what? Yeah, that's helpful to have those, reality checks and sit through it and really try and apply the Dharma. In the end, I had to have a concussion and just step back from my own crazy thoughts and realize these are just crazy thoughts. It's just doubt. Yeah.
Yes, I will talk about it. Because I'm quite prone to self-doubt as a habit of mind. And I think that's the first thing that began to turn it, is I realized that this is just a habit. Oh, it's too hard. Let's bail. It's so once I could see that, it's very clear that in the teachings on joyous effort, this is one of the forms of laziness that we have to overcome. And the tendency, I can trace it. I know where it came from. I know where I learned it. I've had it most of my life. Oh, too hard. And ironically, mostly even when I've had that my whole life, I've managed to stick with the things that I was stuck to. So I can even see that it's not even a decent strategy. I haven't even followed this strategy. It's just a way of soothing my mind or something, or getting myself off the hook or some goofy thing like that. So I do have to work with it a lot. And I have found that working on the fortitude to bear suffering has been the most important thing. So because, I think part of where my self-doubt comes from is like, oh, this shouldn't be so hard. I shouldn't be suffering so much. This shouldn't be happening. I also, grew up as in Sunday school. Now, I have not always been a good girl from about the age of 10, but that Sunday school mind of I should be a good girl and I should know, and I should already know this. How come I don't already know this? I should know this, but I don't. Okay. Or I can't be the person that I aspire to be. It's a huge old gap. So then to have doubt about that is not helpful. So a lot about accepting reality, as one of Venerable Children's quotes that I work with a lot is, when we fight with reality, reality always wins. And that's true when we cling to the impermanent as permanent, when we cling to that which is in the nature of dukkha, expecting pleasure. It happens when we cling to our sense of self. And it happens when we think we should be. So therefore, it happens when we think we should be somebody that we're not. To admit that we're not, and be just as kind and loving to the person that's not what we think we should be as the person we think we should be. Someday we'll be loved, but I don't know by who. And who is that person anyway? It's a fantasy. It's a fantasy. But the habit is really strong. So to really, I think working a lot with the fortitude of learning to accept suffering. That because there's suffering in the mind, just because there's pain here, doesn't mean there's something wrong. And it doesn't mean I have to get away from it as quickly as possible, which we all have done since the beginning of this time. How fruitful. Not. So like that.
I don't think Venerable Tarpa will mind telling her story. For, I don't know, the first few years, when she would get disturbed by something, she'd go to her room and pack her suitcase. She packed it so many times, and gonna walk down the hill dragging it with her. And of course she never did, but it gave her something to do and allowed her to think about, what the heck am I doing? So I think of that often, and of course too, all of us, I think we've left the Abbey to go to visit family or, whatever. And it's so clear. Oh, this is where I need to be. As difficult and painful as it is, this is where I need to be. My gosh. And I think after you meet a certain level of understanding of the path and of yourself and of your potential, it's so clear. It's kind of like you know too much, you can't go backwards now to what was. You already know what a facade it is, and that's helpful.
Besides, you take your mind with you.
So we talk a lot about the challenges and the difficulties and the blah, blah, blah. And I've even had people say, oh, I can't ordain because I don't think I can bear it. Or I can't go to the Abbey because I don't think I can bear the torture or whatever it sounds like. So I would like for us to finish this session by talking about what's joyful. Yeah, what makes us happy about being monastics and living together in a community that shares them. Boson, go please.
So actually, this is gonna involve the last question a little bit too. But so last year in January, I left for I think 9 months because I was ill, and I went and lived by myself in another town in Washington State here. And the whole time I was wanting to be back here, because it's so supportive to be with other people that with teachings and the schedule and just people that are also talking about the Dharma and trying to understand it and practice it. It also became clear to me that if I couldn't be here, that I was still going to be a monastic, and that my refuge is in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, and that the Sangha jewel, not just the humans here. But even though I wasn't having a really hard time out there, but I missed being here. And sometimes it's difficult for me being here, but I really value it. Sometimes it's hard for me to keep the schedule. I value the schedule immensely. Sometimes it's hard to be around a lot of other people. I value all the people here a lot. It's really good to be around them. And I've learned so much through that. And so I really like being a monastic. I like being at the Abbey, but even when I wasn't at the Abbey, I like being a monastic. I like spending my time trying to develop love and compassion and other virtues.
It's a hard topic to sum up in a few sentences, but I'll give it a shot. When I think about how I used to be in my lay life in Canada, in Alberta, I wasn't surrounded by people who were like-minded, who had the same orientation in life. I wasn't living with a teacher, so I had no access really to Dharma teachings. And here we are flooded with Dharma teachings every single day. It may not be a BBC, it may not be, a formal evening teaching or retreat, but just, watching Venerable Chödrön in action and watching everyone else put the teachings into practice. It's moment by moment Dharma, that's for sure. And also, as you spend more time here, you grow your capacity in all ways. Things that you would never dream that you would have done as a layperson, you do here. And you get some skill at it, and you actually get to like it. I really am thrilled to run a chainsaw. And, as a teacher, that was not in my purview at all. And then just seeing that the teachers that a community of practitioners can draw, we have wonderful teachers coming here. And so there's an opportunity to talk about the teachings, to discuss what areas maybe are causing us some confusion in this moment. There's so much we get done here. And then you look at what we've done in just a year at the Abbey, the number of programs we've offered, the buildings that have been built, the people who have come, our extended Dharma family, Sravasti Abbey friends keeps growing. It's quite astounding. And one person alone, it's just not possible. And here, the possibilities are just beautiful and endless.
One of the greatest joys of living here is watching the community change and grow. watching myself change and grow, become the person I want to be, more of the person I want to be. Also, interacting with the lay community and seeing how much they appreciate what we offer. That's just such an amazing benefit. And another amazing quality of living here is that even when we get into those gritty places, then all of a sudden we have a posada and we go and we confess. And it's like the air has been cleared. It's like a very clear day after a smoky 2 weeks. I marvel at the power and the beauty of holding these rites, these monastic rites.
It's such a big topic, but you will find true love, is what I'm gonna say. It's true. I say that because I was so hungry and looking for love in so many ways. And one of the hardest things being ordained was realizing, wow, all these things I thought were love and compassion really were not. They were just attachment or totally polluted and mixed up. And to watch it embodied by people who've practiced for a long time, it's like, oh, that's love. Oh, that's what compassion looks like. And that's what it feels like here. It came as a huge shock. Like, it's nothing like what is shown in the movies or I had experienced even from my family. So it's, just this very deep love that's very consistent, constant, accepting, that I experienced from everyone in community, from our teacher, from the 3 jewels, that is still flowing in the world. So that's something I would not have come into connection with, and that nourishes me a lot. So that love piece, and also the protection of being in community. I could not do this alone. I did not leave for 5 years without unsupervised, so to speak, but I really could see, wow, this is a very protective container. If I had to be alone and try and serve lay people, I don't think I would have that capacity. But here I felt I built up a good depth of resource in myself. Then I have something to start to give at all.
And then last, I think, is so much laughter here. There's so much joy and silly and laughter here. It's everywhere. And it comes from such a kind of a pure place. I was just thinking as you were talking, before I even met Buddhism, I used to laugh, but it often was at the expense of others, that kind of laughter. And it's that polluted, icky kind. And here we just have this pure joy and laughter. And I've never laughed so much in my entire life since here, and that's a very good thing.
So welcome back, everyone. And this is a Q&A, which I will just moderate in a very loose way. I think we'll start with the people here in the room, and we'll just go back and forth. We'll take a question from the floor, and we'll then take a question from the online folks and see how long we go. So let's start by setting a brief motivation again. So let's rejoice that we have this precious opportunity to explore our sincere, heartfelt questions and aspirations, and that we're doing this with like-minded people who really, each in our own way, understand that kind of aspiration. And may whatever transpires as far as conversation goes right now, the questions and maybe some answers, may this be a benefit to the people in the room, to the people online, and throughout the world. Okay, we'll start with a question in the room. First hand up.
Okay. I have been listening about the miserable and unsatisfactory life before take the monastic life about someone here. And I understand that because that was my feelings before the Dharma in my life. But now I feel the urgent need to be benefit to others around me. And I try to do to create a good condition for them. And it's a lonely and heavy way because, you know, and especially because I feel that I don't have in me the condition to give them the things that really they need. For example, feel more peace or feel more more compassion, and that is the things that really they need in his life. I know the other needs, but really are that. And I am thinking how I feel that when if I become too a monastic, I don't left the people. I don't abandono, abandon the people that I am thinking.
I think it's this idea that when we start practicing Buddhism and we have this bodhicitta motivation, want to help others, it kind of is laid out and sounds pretty simple, but actually it is so complicated. And from my experience, until I am able to have some compassion and kindness and loving kindness for myself, I am not going to be able to do much. And so to accept that and have this really long view. This is lifetimes of practice that we're dealing with here. If in this life I am able to find some compassion and loving kindness for myself in a very genuine way, that would be really excellent. And of course, you know, we think in terms of this linear thing, you know, I do this and this and this and this and this and this, but that is not how it goes at all. You know, sometimes I don't think I'm going to be able to affect or help anybody, and that's when they're very helped. Why? Well, because of all the causes and conditions. So this continually moving force that happens, and I'm a part of something, maybe I can do something that's going to be beneficial. I can't really plan for that. I don't, you know, all I can do is bring my authentic self forward and try to identify what is compassion versus what is attachment, or what is my own ego junk, and just be content with that. And it's messy, and there's nothing really to hold on to, because the moment I do, it's changed and gone now. So it's that kind of a practice. So I don't need to beat myself up about I'm not doing enough, or it's too lonely or too hard or too overwhelming. That's not compassion. That's a lot of my ego talking. So I need to get myself out of the way. And when something unfolds in front of me and I'm able to do something to help, good. And there are many opportunities. So good. So that way, I think. That's how I think of this. I don't know if that helped what you were asking, but
I think since I've become a monastic, I've been able to benefit others way more than before. I've met a lot more people, and I've had more tools and a kinder heart to deal with it. And I meet a lot of people here that come here specifically because they're interested in developing good qualities. And they see that here we are endeavoring to do that also. And so it has a big effect on society. And this is only one place. I mean, other monastics all around the world are doing this. When I'm walking around in society, sometimes I wonder if people know what I am, walking around in a skirt and a robe, you know. But then occasionally I'll have somebody come up so delighted that there's a monastic. it is encouraging to them that somebody is, it symbolizes that, then they know what it symbolizes, that it symbolizes somebody that's working towards developing good qualities, and it encourages them. And so, as Venerable Damcho said about her parents, you know, more than giving them a grandkid or cooking them noodles, practicing the Dharma is the best thing she could do for them. And so I think as monastics that we have a good impact on the world.
What I think I also heard in your question, Ginny, is about not abandoning the people around you that you're working with closely now, the people you care about, the family, whatever. I don't know who those people would be for you, right? That's I think untangling from that is a tricky part of making the decision to become a monastic, because it's true that when we leave the home life, we leave the home. But in my own experience, and I see this really of the people I live with too, in ways that I never expected, the fact that I became a monastic had a powerful impact on a lot of people in my life. My family, members of my family who are not Buddhist, even my brother, who is a fundamentalist Christian, was affected in a positive way by my becoming a nun. And the many friends that I left, I mean, some carried off and did on their own thing, but were still moved. It made them rethink their lives. There was all kinds of effect for the people that I was concerned about. And I see that from everybody's family that, well, we all know each other's families eventually. I've seen that in the families of people here as well. So to think about it, two things. One is the analogy they always use is that if you want to be a doctor, you have to go to medical school for a period of time in order to acquire the skills. You can't just go out and start prescribing, or you'll end up in jail or you'll hurt somebody. So we have to learn how to be of benefit. And as you said, it's hard. We don't have the skill really. And part of what monastic life does is begin to train us. Our skills improve. We're not Buddhists, but we're better. I'm better at it than I was before. And I thought I was good at it before. And that's an arrogant fault. And the other thing that came to mind is that I realized when my mom was dying, I haven't cried about that in a long time either. She was in a coma she was basically dead for a long time before they actually took her off the machines. But I was with her for, it seemed like weeks, but I think just a couple of days. And I remember being in that room and I was doing practices and I was doing prayers and I was chanting mantra. And my mother wasn't Buddhist, but she would have loved it all the same, I knew. And I said over and over, wherever you are, I will find you when I'm a Buddha. Wherever you are, I will come help, I promise. And I left, that hospital room when my mom died thinking, how many mothers have I said this to? How many times have I done this in my life? In multiple lives. And that piece about making that promise to this mother this time, realizing in some way I've made that to so many mothers, so many times, so many lifetimes. How the heck am I going to do that? I have to be Buddha. And how am I going to do that? In this life, I have the conditions that let me be like this so that I can be. So I feel like that's a really, really basic movement towards how to benefit others, even though we're, quote, abandoning them. We're not. Yeah.
I think part of the answer to your question is to really investigate what kind of help do they need and what can you offer right now. When I was in Australia, I taught the Discovering Buddhism series for 10 years. And one of the greatest joys of my life is seeing people meet the Dharma and really take it on and grow. But coming here to the Abbey, when I look at Venerable, someone who has realizations, and I see how she can be saying maybe some of the same things, and how deeply that impacts people, that's very humbling.
It's not just the words, it's someone who has actualized the path. That's what's going to help people to help themselves. So right now, I don't know about you, but right now I don't have all those skills that I want to have, so that just being myself is enough to lead someone all the way to enlightenment. I can't do that. So I'm still in medical school.
Okay. Laura, online, please.
Hello, everybody. I apologize if my question is too basic, but this is the first time I have contact with Buddhist monastics. And I really want to know how your day-to-day life is like. How is your routine on a daily basis? And how has that changed, like when you were a novice and where you like go forward in your career? And how does that change? Because right now I don't have much idea how it is. Thank you.
Okay, Venerable Damcho.
It doesn't change no matter how long you're ordained, I don't think. As in, Venerable Children herself is the schedule, is how I think about it. So you start your morning with your practice, wherever you are, and here our practice begins at 5:30. So we wake up earlier too if we have duties like to set up the altar, and it's the same in any monastery. In some monasteries there'll be someone who goes around hitting a board to wake people up, and we don't have that. So we gather in the hall at 5:30 and we practice till 7, and then we take a short break, and then we take turns making breakfast. So there's a rotation system, and then breakfast is at 7:30, and we do prayers before that. And then after breakfast, if there's no special event like a teaching or a retreat ongoing, then the resident community gets together in the office building, and we have what's called a stand-up meeting. So that's kind of unique to the Abbey, where we go around and we rejoice in what we've done in the previous day in one thing. And then we talk about what we're planning to do in the day. And the purpose of the meeting is more to like check in who needs help, or, if we need to coordinate things. Yeah. Not so much to be like, here's what I'm doing, Yeah, so it's to facilitate working together. And then there is an offering service coordinator who will work with guests who are here. And that person meets all the guests at 8:30. So a big part of our training here is to offer service, and just do whatever needs to be done that day. We're also evolving in a process where longer term guests help out with longer term tasks. So, any given day you could be pulling weeds or helping in the kitchen, or everyone here knows that. So we break for lunch at 12:30. There's a short talk by the different monastics that you see posted online, the Bodhisattva's Breakfast Corner. And then we do lunch dishes. Again, there's a rotation for dish doing, and then there's a break. And then there's another service period in the afternoon. And then we have study time, personal study time, or we might have teachings. And then there's an evening meal that's optional for people. And then we close the day with evening practice, and then people can study after that as well. So that's the broad structure. Then, of course, if the weather is too hot, then everything flips around and nobody knows where to be. Like we meditate in the afternoon and we work outside in the evening when it's not too hot. Yeah. But you will find, I think, in most monasteries, that's the rough structure, I guess, except for the Tibetan ones, where a lot more time is put into study and debate. Yeah, so instead of the service period, you have like 4 hours of debate, or
This question could be a whole discussion topic, but can you talk about how you've worked with teasing apart emotional dependency and special friends versus knowing when to reach out and ask for help, but not depend on others for that emotional dependency or have special friends?
So that's a complex process and takes some years, I think, to tease apart. And so, first of all, to get clear about what attachment is, what that means. So exaggerating the positive qualities of somebody and ignoring, things that maybe aren't so skillful. So that's the first thing. And then setting up expectations in the mind and then connecting with them. Then the next part of that is to recognize what it feels like in the body and in the mind when you are in attachment. So for me, it's kind of a zingy feeling I'm anticipating, I'm a little revved, I'm a little looking for, you know. I set up the scenario in my mind often, how it's going to be, what I'm going to get. And then after you've identified that to some degree, then the next part is to interrupt it. And then the self-centered attitude fights with you about that because it doesn't want you to interrupt it. So then you have the internal battle around that. And then that can be scary. It can make you feel angry. You can feel, kind of even victimed about it, why do I have to do this all my own, blah, blah, blah. And so then if there is a need to connect and to get some support or empathy or whatever, then that process is also complicated. So what am I looking for? What resources do I have myself to work on whatever it is that's difficult for me? That takes some time. If I feel like I can't really manage it myself and I want to open up to somebody else, then the way I did it here was first I would ask Venerable Children because she was here. She's not so involved in the community so much, and there's so many more people now, there's more people to ask. So then it would be asking a senior and trying to be transparent and open about it, and going to that person with the attitude of, I'm going to ask you for some maybe advice or some help or some support, and I'm going to listen deeply to it. I'm not going to let my yes but mind push away. I'm going to try to, and if it wants to do that, okay, but I'm not going to voice that. I'm just going to sit with what I get from the other person, and then see where that lands and if there's something there that could be helpful for me. So in that way, I think. And this is, again, one of those messy processes. It's not linear, clean, clear. It's like I start out and I'm asking and I see that I'm attached and I get angry and and that comes, and then I have to start again and like that. So to allow ourselves to just accept that this is a very complicated, messy process that takes a lot of practice. So we give ourselves permission to practice.
I think, again, it's also seeing what we're conditioned to consider a friend or get emotionally dependent on. And that was just so much of the learning process for me in the first few years. There was an anagarika here who fit the mold of the kind of person who was my best friend from age 7. And I was trying to be really mindful of that. But I could see, and I'm so used to being in a peer group posse. I've had a posse since high school. It rotates, it's like, here's the gang. These are the people I count on. They have my back. Yeah. And they've all come to the Abbey to visit the posse from college days. So, that's my emotional crutch. So to not have that was very disconcerting. But what taught me a lot was to watch the attachment happen with this other trainee. And then he left to train somewhere else. Oh my God, I was in so much pain internally. It was like, and I just thought, we are not doing this again. We cannot do this again. Even though I tried to be mindful, the habit was so strong. So then I had to really ask myself, just to be mindful, like, what am I projecting on different people? Like, I can't even see people for who they are. Like, just because they look a certain way, fit a certain mold, have certain interests, my mind just goes like that. It happened with guests too, so that I had to really watch that. The first young woman who looked like my college best friend, right? And she leaves and I'm in tears at the discussion group. I'm like, what is going on? This is someone who came for 2 weeks. Like, stop. So just being aware of that. And then I could start to really work with the attachment internally to see, wow, okay, what do I value in a friendship? What am I looking for? And to learn to relate to, I will say, I'm like, they're all a lot older. I'm sure we have nothing in common. And they're all like my boss. All the nuns who were, there was Venerable Jampa who was in my age group, right? But she's like 6 years older. So everyone's like old. They don't know me. And that is not true. Right. And so, yeah, just relearning how to relate to people and learning how monastics relate to people. That's a huge part of people give you so much space with love and care to take care of your own mind. That's what I really didn't expect. Yeah.
I think also for me, getting extremely familiar with what that hole feels like, that big sucking sound that wants somebody, something, anything to fill it up, to make me okay, to make me normal, to make me a person, to make me know I exist. Right, what that feels like inside. And when that feeling kind of emerges in a huge way, to get in that hole myself. It never crossed my mind, I don't think until I had come here, that I'm the only one that can fill it up. So to get very familiar with that and to use the practices to fill it up. I've done so much light and nectar from Buddhists coming in to try to fill that hole. And it's often very effective, sometimes not so, but often. There was one whole winter retreat where I had the entire refuge field applauding for me for most of the retreat. And it helped. At the same time, I'm not just getting applause from the Buddhists, but also I'm sitting there looking at, and what does this do? How, what is this appreciation? What is it? I mean, we have to work the antidotes. We have to work the antidotes, or all the other gimmicks don't work. But getting familiar with what that need feels like, and trying to probe to different ways to use the practice to feed it myself. And then when you're in trouble, then you go talk to somebody, as everyone has advised. But to really put a brake on. And that's where Venerable Jigme was talking about getting in touch with this attachment, getting a clear picture in your mind that there is no external force that can take care of this. That wound is mine. Nobody else. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, the timing. Venerable Robina Corton, is very direct. She's been very helpful to me in my life. And I was complaining to her once about, oh yes, I was in a big attachment, working with attachment period. And Venerable Ravina was there, and I was, saying, I've done these meditations, and my heart is breaking. But when I get up and I do the meditations, and I feel great, and then I stand up, and the pain is all there again. And I was complaining about that. And Venerable Ravina looked at me and she said, "Have some humility." You've had this attachment since beginningless time. You think a few meditation sessions and you're going to be free? So have some humility.
My question is about sustainability of Abbey in the future, because I think that a lot of monastery, like Abbey, actually is growing bigger in size. And how would you be able to sustain a large population of Abbey monastics? And also largely because of the venerable children. If one day if venerable children is no longer here, how are you going to sustain the four requisites, which is a very important question.
Since we all first came here, Venerable Children has been preparing us for her death. And she continues to do so. The bigger we get, the more she has stepped back, actually. So that's one piece. I think that the harmony that we value here, the training program, that Dharma is the most important thing, is what will sustain us for future. We don't plan things like we're going to have 2.3 people come in the next 6 months and then we're going to train them or something. We don't do it like that. It's this organic thing that happens because we have the bandwidth and the space and the skill and the resources to open up to the the next group or some more people. So it goes that way. So it's nothing that's some kind of a planned thing that happens. It's very organic, and because of that, I believe that it really matches with the reality of what is happening here. And that's why it works. If we continue to do that, then I don't foresee that there's going to be big obstacles or difficulties. We have a very strong value in the Vinaya and in how we live our lives. We are protected because of that, and it will go forward because of that. So the basis has been laid that is quite well done, I think, and because of Venerable Children mostly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I'm blanking out now, but Venerable Children gave this great Bodhisattva's Breakfast Corner talk where she basically said, if sentient beings don't need the Abbey, it will cease to exist. It's entirely dependent on the needs of sentient beings and their karma. Same thing for the Buddha Hall, yeah? Like you want to build that, it depends on sentient beings' karma, yeah? It's not something that we can will into existence on our own. So that's a very powerful idea, like if we're just so interdependent on causes and conditions. The place is founded based on the Dharma, and the Vinaya, once you have 4 fully ordained monastics here, start doing the Posada, start doing the 3 rites. That's what keeps the Dharma flourishing in the world. That's what keeps the community together and able to purify itself. So these processes have been set up by the Buddha, and if we follow them, then it's sustaining. Like that, she set up this place to be dependent on the kindness of lay people. No staff run this place. This is how the Buddha set it up. You teach. If people benefit, they support. If they don't benefit, end of story, go home. I mean, yeah. So it's a sobering, but it gives you a sense of the responsibility of carrying the Dharma forward.
Venerable laid out the founding principles of the Abbey very, very clearly. They're on our website. I can't remember now what page they're on. They're somewhere in the monastic life section. But what the one of the most basic is generosity. So this whole place is set up also with an understanding of karma. And yes, we live by the kindness of others, and we also offer the Dharma without freely. We offer it freely, and that's part of the practice of generosity. And the Abbey is intentionally generous in sharing what we have, resources where it's necessary. I mean, we do that. So as long as we're creating the causes, and as long as part of creating the causes is following these founding principles, I think I used to, when we first started building Gotami House, I was writing the letters to help people invite generosity for that, and describing the project. And I said something like, we hope the Abbey will exist for 1,000 years or something like that. Venerable Children sent the copy back and she said, what, 1,000 years? 10,000 years? What do you think? This was 1,000 years is too short. She said, don't you think the seeds that you plant in your own minds and the minds of others will go on and on and on and on and on and on and on, far beyond 1,000 years? The thinking is big, expansive. And as long as we're doing our practice, as they say, and practicing generosity, though, that's also intentional, not so that we get food, but as living within the framework of this is the karmic cause. Yeah.
One question I had was on taking monastic vows as a lifetime commitment versus as a training, and whether you can talk to that, because from my side, I see monasticism, it's clear to me how it's a training, but it's not completely clear to me yet whether it's a lifetime commitment that I want to take. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Are you referring to intentionally taking temporary ordination as a training, or are you talking about I'm taking this as a training for as long as it works out for me, and then I'm going to be able to get out? I mean, can you say it in a different way that's clear?
So, what does it really entail to take a lifetime commitment to monasticism? Because in the Tibetan tradition, you don't really have any other options as far as taking temporary ordination is. What kind of renunciation is entailed in a lifetime commitment? Because none of us have taken lifetime commitments of that extent. We have taken maybe lay vows, but those feel very flexible in the sense that they can be applied in every possible situation. You can apply your lay vows, but it seems, maybe incorrectly, that monastic vows, you just don't know exactly what you might be getting into. And it's a level of renunciation that's so deep. I'm just curious to understand what is the mental state that is required to really honestly take lifetime vows.
Maybe I'll just speak personally. When I came here and took anagarika, got in the blue suit, I gave myself permission to do this for a year. And within that year, then I was trained and had a year's worth of experiencing the community and a year's worth of seeing how my mind was. And so it's a funny thing. There's like two tracks. One is, this is the hardest thing I have ever done. Who are you people? There's that part. But the other part is, this is the most beneficial thing I've ever done. But you can't know that without experiencing it. So the training process here is to explore that. We have had people that have come here to do the anagarika, and at the end of it, they say, this lifestyle is not for me. And that is as successful as somebody that says, I have done this for a year and I want to go forward. So it's this complicated process over time. I don't know. I think everybody that has ordained here, it was pretty clear, in this way. Oh, it's going to be difficult, and I'm going to have a lot of hard things that I have to work with. But the way that I'm going is only going to be beneficial for myself and others. I don't even think of it as a lifetime. I think of it as a multi-lifetime, because I can't finish this path in this life. Possible. It's not where I am. And so, but I know the benefit of what I've already experienced. And so a lot of my prayers and aspirations are, please let me meet the Dharma again much younger. Please let me do that.
Before I ordained, Venerable strongly urged me to meditate on the suffering of samsara. And again and again and again. And I think that meditation leads us to conclude that there's really nothing here that's worth hanging on to. Why would I not go for the full meal deal? Why would I not want to get out of this in the most expedient way that I could? So, if there's that seeking of truth, when you've done your own deep investigation, that's what's going to help you make that commitment. Nothing outside of yourself. You have to do that investigation. And I don't know if this analogy quite fits, but this was true in my own experience. I had lived with someone in a committed relationship, and then I went through a marriage ceremony, and the two things were very different. It's like when you start closing back doors, you're in with both your feet.
And whatever comes up, you have a commitment to work with it. So that helps.
Traditionally, people don't study the vows of full monastic, the precepts, until they've ordained. So traditionally, it has been, based on this renunciation, I want to follow this path. Now, how do I do it? And these precepts are part of that. In fact, the first monastics didn't have any precepts. They were developed as things came up. But then, we have this training program that helps people to look at things. And I think it really has to be based on just this thing of there's seeing lay life as a dead-end distraction. And there's the verse in 37 practices of bodhisattvas that talks about sensual pleasures being like salt water. The more you drink, the more you are thirsty. I think younger in my own life, I think I still need to drink more salt water to be convinced of that. But I've drank enough salt water that I'm not about to drink any more of it. And so there is just a certain view of what you want to do with your life. And I think that anagarika period can be very helpful for that. And somebody may get to the end of a year and say, I think I want to do this for another year. They might not be convinced or decided at the end. Or they may say, I want to ordain, or they may say, this is not for me. Or even come back later and after having had other time to reflect on lay life more too. But it really does have to be a strong kind of renunciation, because I don't like the word renunciation so much. It's a determination for liberation. And so, before my own full ordination, I spent a lot of time with thinking about the sufferings of samsara.
I wanted to add that much of my life I was terrified of commitment. Like the idea, I don't think I was ever in a job for more than a year or two. Relationship, anything up to 2 years felt like jail. So it was surprising to me that this did not come up with ordination. And I think it has to do with a view of multiple lifetimes. When you think of so many lifetimes, just this life is like so brief. I was very inspired by the idea that, especially like with the Bodhisattva precepts, you take them until full awakening. Like, can you imagine if you don't kill anybody from now until awakening, how many lives you protect? Just that notion like, whoa, this has an incredible long-ranging impact. And so there was no doubt there. It was like, oh, I'm creating the causes for like an incredible, unbelievable amount of time that I can't even make sense of. That this short life is going to be used in a good way. That's one piece that helped me with the commitment piece. So it didn't feel like a burden, you know what I mean? It was like, oh, I really want to move towards this. And the other piece is the responsibility to the lay people. And that may come from coming from a country like Singapore, where there's a big Buddhist community. You see, it can be very difficult for lay people if people ordain and then leave. And, depending where their refuge is, they get confused, or they're like, does the path really work? When I ordained a monastic, I respected very much this road for personal reasons, and they're still in the Dharma, but that made me sit up like, oh, this is the impact of that. Then I'm like, wow, I really need to think this through carefully, because it affects not just me, but a lot of people's faith. So to be careful that way. So when you make a lifelong commitment, it is a responsibility to a lot of sentient beings.
It's not like you have to make this decision by the end of EML. So some people come here thinking that they have to decide by August 8th, or they have to decide by, month 10 of Anagarika. Everyone is so different. Our minds, evolve in the way that they do. And to just create the causes and conditions for your practice to grow. That's the key. Not will I be ordained? Should I be ordained by 2023? What can I do right now for my practice to flourish and for me to really invest sincere, heartfelt effort in that?
Yes, I would like to know a little bit about the your process of decision making, or the let's say the organizational structure. I can see that apparently you have something like a senior bhikshuni and bhikshu panel, and it seems that there are different teams doing different tasks. So I would like to know how you organize your work. That is one part of the question. The other question is more about the informal relations within the abbey. Like, is it that like everyone relates to everyone exactly the same way, or are there some? Is it possible that some people have a friendship which is each other, or is it everyone is a member of a group and that's it?
You can talk about the
Org structure.
with joy.
This meeting is being recorded.
I know. It's an evolving process. It's pretty organic, actually. Let me give you a little history. When the Abbey was founded, first of all, there was only venerable children and a handful of lay people who were trying to help. We were not as helpful, I think, as we thought we were, but we tried. Then Venerable Semke came, who wasn't Venerable Semke at the time, and Venerable Tarpa came, who wasn't Venerable Tarpa at that time, and the three of them did the work on the ground, and the lay people, lay volunteers outside did a lot of other stuff. So with those three people, they kind of sat down at breakfast every morning and figured out what was going to happen for that day. The accounting was done by a volunteer from the beginning, and she is still our accountant in Seattle. She does all the accounting. Our bookkeeper was done by a volunteer outside. She did it until just a year ago, and now for the first time, bookkeeping has moved onto the property. The publicity and inviting generosity was done off-site for many, many years, and then when this nun moved here, it moved here. So that organic process of how those kind of basic organizational things got done have evolved with the person. As more, this is my version of the history, right? But as more and more people began to come, and everybody brought their skills. And Venerable Children said from the beginning, this abbey will be formed on the basis of the karma of the people who come here. And their skills are what will shape and make this place. And that is totally true. Both from the people who come for even a short visit, some people who've been here for a very short time leave an enormous impact on the directions that we go. For example, we have a YouTube channel because we had a young man here for about a year who was super tech savvy in 2007. He said, "Oh, we should be on YouTube." We're all like, "What is that?" He got us started and then he left. So Venerable Jigme, who's the tech savviest of this, pulled out some instruction book and, learned to run this camera. And, now we reach hundreds of thousands of people. Alex Impact is still here. And I thank him regularly, So he's just one example, right? So then just a few years ago, the situation came to, actually there were a bunch of nuns here and somebody asked, "What is your structure?" And it was kind of messy. So we were inspired to get more structured because now we have too many people to sit around the table and figure out what we're going to do today and what needs to be done. So the reason I put my thing over my head is because it is a process, and we thought that we were going to create a structure that would actually last for a time. But every time someone new comes or someone leaves, which doesn't happen as often as people come, the whole dynamic shifts. The whole set of skills shifts. And then we also have, as people grow in the Dharma, their capacity also grows. And their maturity in their practice means that they're able to take on more responsibilities within the structure. So rather than this having developed as an organizational structure that will last for all time, especially then came COVID,
which required a complete redo. And then this year now I'm on version, I think we're on version. No. We did 7 versions before we actually rolled it out. Then we rolled out this version, and then we had to do a little shift and in May or so, and we're going to have to do another little shift right after the program. So we do have teams, and we do have identified things that need to be done. And our teams include, and I'm not going to be able to get them all, things like the kitchen team, the video team, the Dharma dissemination team, the publicity and I-bidding generosity team. SAFE is under, the education program is under Dharma dissemination. The prison program is under Dharma dissemination. We have an events team. We have a guest team, a guest welcoming, guest care team. We have a community care team. So, we try to isolate all the things that are, or identify all the things that need to happen. And it's complicated. You can hear that, right? So there's like what you would do if you were like in a corporation. Well, we do these things. These things have to be done. And then you have what happens when you live in a household. Oh, we have cars. We have cats. Things have to be, we have to have enough toothpaste. So there's this whole kind of personal level thing that has to be handled for the whole community as well. So the structure is, I think it's working. And we're doing our best to try to balance and rebalance as people come, to give people a chance for meaningful work. And also people have to do things they don't like. We do a lot of shared work in terms of like cooking and cleaning and maintenance around the place. And then there are the maintenance specialists who know how to run the water system. I do not. Who know how to run the computers. I do not. Many of those kinds of things. So we do work together. You had a question about seniority. Oh, yeah, the seniority came to my mind. It's also true, as Venerable Damchu said earlier this morning, she's no longer a junior. She's now kind of rising up towards the senior role. And the same thing, I think I can speak for Venerable Semke and Venerable Jigme for sure. All of a sudden we're supposed to be training these people. What? What? Me? I don't know anything. This was about, I don't know, we're still working that out, but the level of responsibility grows also as time goes on. And what I think we're coming to also as well is the capacity of the seniors who are becoming seniors is also going to shift. It's in the process of shifting, I think. So all of these things are like, they're dynamic and in motion sort of all the time. Venerable's been teaching a lot lately about anyone who is attached to stability and security and having things fixed and predictable. This is our training, because they're not. So that's the first half of the question. I can't remember the second half, so I'll get to the mic. Unless somebody wants to add something.
I wanted to share what I learned from this whole organization structure process, because it came about, I recall, during the Living Vinaya in the West course. Yeah, there were nuns from Taiwan, from Dharma Drum, from Luminary Temple, and there was us. And then we were the 3 established communities. Yeah, and then nuns who were maybe starting communities, many different situations coming together. And there was one session where we talked about how does your monastery organize service work. Then you have Dharma Drum showing their very complex organization chart that looks like a corporate structure, right? But they face the same issues. We've talked to them about what happens after your teacher dies. How do you figure out succession? But they have like a 200-person plus organization with tens of thousands of lay people. So that's one system. We were all like, when we saw their organization chart. And then we drew ours, which was a circle for the stand-up meeting and a lot of arrows. That's how we organize ourselves. We stand in a circle and talk about what we need to do. And Venerable Wu-in, the teacher, went, and she said, that's how we used to be. And she said, you can't do that anymore. And it was like, oh, okay. So we really had to think about, and Venerable is very clear, like she doesn't want a structure for the sake of structure. It's just to help facilitate what we do. And of course, because I'm so clever and intelligent, I made a spreadsheet of all the things that we do here, each person, snow blowing. They had monastics' names on top, and then tasks we do on the left. Stop shaking your head, Venerable Samten. She's lived with my spreadsheets. Now, cross, who does what? And I sent it to Venerable, like, it's so straightforward. This is what everyone does. Just sort the crosses. Then you have the teams. That's it. She assigned me and 2 Shikshamanas to work out the organization structure during winter retreat because I was so smart, right? It was maybe the hardest thing I've ever done. And you realize that you cannot organize people on a spreadsheet. And that the whole organization of a monastery is based on different principles. It was a huge learning process for me that whole year, just even working with the 2 people to try and think about it, come up with some kind of structure that the community can live with. Eventually, I kind of ran away from the process, but at the heart of it was also the Vinaya. Yeah, we run our kitchen according to Vinaya principles. We take care of things for the Sangha of the 10 directions. We're not trying to make money. You're stewarding a place for 10,000 years. So that's a whole different way of thinking that I had no clue about in my fancy spreadsheet.
Were all the aspects of your question addressed? Venerable, may I talk?
I just was going to re-ask the second part of the question. It was more about the, let's say, the informal relationships within the Abbey. I was interested to know if there are like maybe specific friendships between specific people, or is it really like everyone has exactly the same relation to everyone in the sense that everyone is being a member of the group?
So that's a hard question to answer. I'll give it a shot. We do have the convention here that we don't have special friends. We live in what we call the rock tumbler, which means that my afflictions arise and whoever's in front of me gets the opportunity to watch and respond to those. In the process, if I'm smart and I am applying Dharma, I learn a ton. And so the practice is to have equanimity for everyone, but I am not skilled in that way yet. And so I have challenges with people. But the bottom line and the goal is to keep developing my equanimity. And as you continue to do this in community, you realize that I am, of course, the person, and it's my mind that creates my happiness or my misery. So it is up to me to keep working with that so that I can see others in a light of beauty and of kindness and of caring. And so it is a messy process, but that's the goal. So I already understand very clearly if I create a special friend here, that means that it's based on attachment and I'm creating misery for myself and for the other person. Now, why would I do that? That would not be helpful. So I don't do that. Even if there's a part of me that is so familiar with that process, I know how to do it in a heartbeat, but I do not, because it is not going to be beneficial for my practice, for the person, for the community. Not going to do it. So in that way, that's kind of how I approach that, I guess. Oh, yeah. So, here's the other thing. We do a lot of mentoring here. So those that have been here longer, we try to impart what we have learned. We try to develop a connection with those that are younger that is respectful, not based on attachment. And the motivation for it is we want to see the Dharma flourish in the West. For me personally, I say that, and then I also say so that in next life I could come back here So in that way. So again, this long view. And so we do a lot of mentoring. And if it's done properly, then as a so-called senior, I'm learning just as much as the so-called junior. So it's this mutual interdependent process that we do.
The mentoring process is a little, I don't know how many years we've been doing it now. Not so many. But I personally feel that it's incredibly valuable to help prevent stratification by age, or like, for example, some of us have known each other. Actually, some of us knew each other in Seattle when we were studied with vulnerable children. We've known each other for 30 years. That's, you know, you would expect that that would cause a certain kind of relationship, good or bad. but by having the mentoring process, it formalizes in a way for newer members of the community and the older members of the community to develop trusting relationships with each other, so that over a period of time, then it's not like you can only go to your mentor. Oh, well, I had this kind of connection with my mentor 2 years ago, and I know she gets this part. I can go talk to that person as well. Or, you know, it opens up the network so that it's not just everybody that came in that year all know each other, but nobody else knows them, right? So I'm actually quite happy with the effect of that.
Well, I've noticed this time that what's coming up is sort of a mixed. Well, I've noticed that I'm kind of clinging to an identity with my career, but more thinking that that's my strength, and wondering how, if anyone had that come up, and how you work with it. If you feel like, well, your only strength in life, you probably can't do that here, because that's not something that maybe happens here.
I didn't live very far from here, and I did a lot of work in the woods. And so I liked working in the woods, which I haven't done at all this year, actually. But I'm working with other things like infrastructure, which I also have some knowledge of. But actually, when I think of this question, it brings up the opposite. When I had to work on a computer, and I had not been on a computer very much, and how I just hate it, the way it made me feel like a little child, because I would say, how do you do this? And someone says, like, oh, you do this, 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 and this. And I didn't, they might as well be talking Tibetan to me, which I don't understand, because it was so foreign to me. And I just saw that how much identity is in with the things that we feel competent in and familiar with, and had to deal with a lot of different things here. And I definitely notice myself steering towards the things that I'm comfortable with and confident in. And sometimes we get given jobs that aren't that, and that's good for our growth.
I had to work with this one a lot. It was the biggest obstacle for me to get here. I loved my career. That was the thing that was, if anything, would kind of hold me back. What helped me, and of course, Benefit Children, I talked to her a lot about this. She said, what you're doing now is very much just for this life. And that released me. Because what we're doing here is for life upon life upon lifetime. And if we do it just following what the Buddha taught, we are going to have such amazing benefit to so many. And so, you know, when I first came here, I was thrown into things like figuring out how to turn on a camera and then film stuff and like that. And I had no idea about any of that. So, but, you know, over the years, of course, you know, since I was trained as a nurse, I help people when they have difficulties, physical or mental. And so I am still doing what I loved to do, but the context is so different now. It's so vast. And so if you have this long vision, then it doesn't matter what you're doing in this life. You can or can't do it here, that's fine. But what you're going to be doing, and to see the benefit of how you impact so many people, it's astounding to me. And that's only growing. That only grows. It's not like it stops somewhere, it just keeps growing because of our Buddha potential. So,
as I mentioned the other day in the morning motivation, I think humility is such an important part of our practice here. And when a lot of the jobs that we do here, maybe not all of them, but a lot of them have to do with menial labor. So the first month or two that I was here, it seemed like every day offering service was going out to the forest to cut down little trees. And my mind was just screaming, I've done all this study and I'm going to cut down trees. That's what I'm going to do in my monastic life. It was the best training I've had because I got to see how arrogant I was and how attached I was to certain identities. So every time you come up against that rub of what I have to let go of, that's such a great opportunity to really see your mind and think again about what's important here. Like I was saying earlier, I think we learn a lot about emptiness just by living here and noticing what comes up when we're asked to serve. Great training. You can't pay to get that training. Seriously.
And two, I think to see, you think the identity is helping you or safety or some kind of thing, but it's limited, to see its limitations and disadvantages too, that helped me. And more to look inside, like what is this emotional need that I think is being met by this identity, whatever it might be. For me, it was very emotional. I found that I process a lot of my emotions through the collaborating with others, making art and theater. And not to have that, the first two retreats, I was like, oh, here I am left alone with my afflictions and no crutch. Can't write a play, can't write a story, can't go sing about it. And then to build those inner resources slowly over time. Yeah. So that, just seeing, oh, that's what I was investing in that. But you know what? That's not refuge. That's imperfect. It's samsaric. It's not going to bring true happiness. How about I try and build that here instead? It's slow, it's painful, but this will last much longer beyond this life. Yeah, so focusing that way. I will say having a good sense of humor helps too. When I first moved here, one of the first skits I saw, we do, well, yes, was of, I think you were seeing Dr. Freud and you had come in with your great resume being like, I have this resume and nobody recognizes me for anything I do here. True. But watching that, I was like, yes. And I'm like, oh, this is normal. Okay. So, just laugh about it.
One is that I think that we've all shared about this over time. It happens, some way, not right at the beginning, but somewhere early on, I start to realize, and it's been kind of universal, that the things we did to prove ourselves out there don't work here. And you try again, and you try again, and you try again. It's always worked. I've always been praised for this. I've always gotten credit for the blah, 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 blah. And it doesn't work, and it doesn't work, and it doesn't work. And you finally see that it is just a shtick. We all go through life making the shticks that present ourselves to the world. And then we come here, and I think any community probably does the same thing. Right? You go to the monastic community holding the different kind of value, and the shtick just doesn't work. And that's when we actually have to learn to practice. That's when the practice really kicks into gear, because our automatic response to the world is no longer working. And it is painful. But the other thing I wanted to say too is that everybody brought skills with them. And then we come here, and how we apply them is different. So I've certainly had to work with that a lot, in that how you do publicity out there or how you do inviting generosity out there is really different from the mind that is hoping to create an environment, not where we're asking, but where we're giving people an opportunity to take part in something that's meaningful for them. You have to completely change the orientation. But am I using the same skill?
Actually, yes. So I think all of us who have brought skills and are using them, part of what has to happen is the identity has to come off. And then we can see, oh, I can use this skill in this way that's about practicing and sharing the Dharma. And then it becomes fulfilling in a whole different way. So it's not like everything you ever did gets lost, but it gets used in a different way.
Only one question.
Okay.
Because I realize I usually have a lot of questions, but with all what you shared, it was so rich, and I feel really nourished by this. And I feel just take time to just think about all these things. But just one question that came about mentoring process. Could you explain a bit more about it? Is it always with the same person? Is it going the same way through years? Is it with when a new person arrives? Is it with a junior or a senior? Things like that. And what is done? How is it done exactly, if you can?
So the way that we have it organized now is we do a lot of things annually, like we all move our rooms annually. And so we change and after we come out of retreat, that's when these kinds of things kind of happen. So we also change the mentoring dyads after retreat is ended and we've moved rooms. There are 5 or 6 of us that mentor. Yeah, 5 or 6 of us are kind of the mentors. And we get together, we try to get together monthly, and we talk about what is coming up and how we can help. And so it's a time for supporting each other. When we meet with our mentee, most of us have 1, some of us have 2. We meet for about 15 or 20 minutes a week, and we have made it a bit directed. So what are you dealing with in terms of, afflictions or your mind? What's going on? How's your practice going? What kind of support do you need? And so it's kind of that way. Then we tend to bring in programs or that are kind of address how one can develop. So like right now, we have a weekly class on nonviolent communication. And so everybody comes to that, and we practice that type of communication. We also do a group going through the online SAFE course with the people here, with the newer ones here. And that's kind of it's kind of a process group, sort of. We'll take a question and then everybody answers it, and then we kind of unpack it and see how whatever it is relates to community life and to becoming a community member, I guess I would say. And so that also is a time where people can see how similar they are to everybody else, and how that we all can be supported and can get empathy when we need it, and can work things out on our own. So it's that kind of process. So that's kind of a brief example, I guess. Yeah, more than what you need.
Except to say that the purpose of the mentoring is to help the person grow into being a full monastic, right? So we're not so we'll work with afflictions that come up, or work with things that, just ask about whatever's going on, but also trying to bring it back to what are the antidotes, what are the Dharma answers. So it stays within that framework. Our wish is to grow. Venerable children once I don't know why this stuck with me, and I don't even know what caused this, but she was talking about, I want everyone, at that time we had only nuns, I want all the nuns to just blossom like a beautiful lotus. And she was so lovely in the way she presented it. So that's my mind about the mentoring. We want the nuns and the monks to blossom like a beautiful lotus, and that's what we're after.